The World Isn't a Globe, and the World Isn't Flat by Jacob. What is globalization? By definition, globalization is the free movement of goods, services, and people across the world in seamless, integrated manner. Some of the key points to take away from globalization are the opening of global economies, increased trade between nations, and the increased interconnectedness, and of course, the integration between economies. Some of the key forces that drive globalization: national market opening, trade restrictions, things like tariffs being removed or put on to impact or influence other trades or countries, faster shipping and transportation thanks to technology, of course, and consumer demand, so there has to be a market, of course, and competition, which is a huge one. And last but not least is technological advancements, which are definitely a huge driving force in any modern developed country's economy. His argument, The World is Flat, obviously is his book, and he discusses the influences that are flattening the world. This is just a brief overview of what it is, from what I got from it. And he goes on to mention the inventions of information technology have contributed to this flattening greatly, and things like the global supply chain, allowing stores that don't produce their own products to be some of the top grocery or produce stores in the world or in our country. Also, he mentions the use of tools that help us produce faster, which is obviously things like the internet, data, transportation. And then some of the key things to take from this book or his argument would be the spread of information, open software, which is obviously technology, global supply chain, and transportation and speed. So these are some of the key factors that I took away for his argument why the world is flat and level. And what he really means by that is everyone has a chance to compete in this market, which is kind of true, but I've done some research on this before I even did this PowerPoint in my humanities class, and versus like developed countries and undeveloped countries, and I realized how big of a difference there really is between us and parts of China that do not live anything like us. Although they may have access to internet, they don't have access to tools to get to the internet, and they live a completely different lifestyle than we do, and it shows incredibly the effects that it has on the people and the population at a whole and the country. But we don't, of course, we don't hear or see things about that. So I'm going to argue that the world isn't level. It may not be flat, may not be whatever you want to call it, but it's not level. There's a few bumps in it. Although I agree with many of his points, I can't help but oppose his theory. Before doing any of this research on this topic, I was already well aware of it, like I mentioned. Because of the amount of people without internet in the world, and if they do have internet, it's extremely intermittent and slow, probably. Like, for example, the United States is probably the seventh country on the list for fastest internet, number seven. And not even all of our people in our country have access to the internet, believe it or not. And even in the countries that do have access to the internet and may, have computers and all that stuff, some of them aren't even wealthy enough to have that. So whether the country has technology or not, they may not even have the tools, like I said, to access it. And it's not flat yet anyway. The economies with no access to the World Wide Web, they're limited to local trade and supply, which leaves their economy in the dark, not connected, in other words, and they will only fall further behind, and obviously it's going to take them longer to catch up. So the playing field is not level, and it won't be level until everyone has the same equal opportunity, which is kind of what he was arguing, and kind of why I don't agree, because there's a large amount of people, and I'll mention it later, that don't even have access to the internet, or their economies, suffering from the fact of technology and globalization. These are some of the statistics that I found that I would, if you ever look at this, I would definitely look into this. I'm not going to explain it because it's kind of hard to explain and I'll go on forever, but it gives you a real idea of the amount of people in the world and how not equal we are at all. Like the equality is insane. I mean, half these people are rich off of underpaid, low waged workers that don't have any equal opportunity. Um, One of the biggest factors in globalization mentioned in the TED Talk that was sourced in our assignment, I can't even say his name, He mentions that countries with common language trade 43% more on average. So, like Canada, our neighbor, or Europe, which are some of the huge trade partners out there. Countries that share a membership in the same trade bloc, like NAFTA, like some of three of the most prominent countries in the trade world, all have an agreement and partnership to trade together, and they're 40% more likely to trade than other countries. And of course, having a common currency. Also, research has shown, which he also mentions, but he goes into a little more detail on that and gets specific. I just want to leave it at that. Some of the top 20 export countries in the world. I chose this because obviously countries that are producing goods are going to export, and countries that can't afford or things like that aren't going to import tons of goods. So that doesn't really matter. But this just gives you an idea of how much more China does than us, and how much more we do than like Japan or Netherlands or any of these people. These are just the top 20. Like for example, the exported goods, a total of 195 countries in the world, and this just shows you the differences between the top 20 and how large they are. Can you imagine having a list of 195 of them? And I think my biggest argument with this, like I said, is from some of the research I've done in the past, and it's technology. It has a huge influence on the economy. Developed countries, undeveloped countries, it makes a world of difference. Um, and honestly, it's probably like I said, at the core of many countries' economic growth. Literally, it has to be. And it's like the backbone of it. And if undeveloped countries had more access to the internet, they would probably have much more chance to compete. And I mentioned a few key points that it would bring about, just job creation, the GDP growth, business growth, workforce transformation, which is the ability to hire informed workers or educated workers with access to information, and so on, and the vicious cycle continues. Um, this is the population's internet access, just to give you an idea to support my argument. Um, as of 2016, only 45% of the people have access to the internet. I'm not saying that they don't have access, but still, some of them they just don't know how to use it. They're undereducated. 45%, not even half of our population, is accessing the internet in 2016. And then obviously, like I said, it restricts them from education. So it has more effects than just not having access to buy or sell things or start a business. It's huge. Internet users by country. This is out of the total users in all of the world. This is where they come from. So this really gives you an idea how small we are compared to China or Asia. Um, and then some of the other countries. They break down this chart on the ITS, which is like the International Trade Commission website, and you can get more details there. Um, but yeah, even with internet, can they afford? Even with web access, can they afford the tech? How can everyone be equal if not everyone has a chance to compete or the same equal chance to compete? And citations page. So that is all. Hope you enjoyed my presentation. Thank you very much.